The sun was starting to dip, painting the sky over the coastal highway in streaks of orange and purple. It was that quiet hour, not quite day, not quite night, when the road usually whispered instead of roared. For the officer in the black and white cruiser, parked in his usual turnout near the mile 7 marker, it was the best time to catch them. The commuters were gone, and the road belonged to the locals, and the people who thought an empty stretch of asphalt was an invitation. He was a big man, built solid like someone who'd played linebacker in high school and never really lost the shape. His uniform shirt was crisp, but his eyes, behind a pair of mirrored sunglasses he hadn't yet taken off, held a quiet tiredness. It was the tiredness that comes from seeing too much of the same thing, day after day. He'd been on this stretch for years. He knew its rhythms, the old fishermen puttering back from the pier, the kids from the high school racing their beat-up Hondas, the tourists gawking at the ocean views. He sipped lukewarm coffee from a paper cup, the radio crackling with the dull, routine chatter of a quiet county. Then he heard it. Not with the radar gun, which was humming softly on his dash, but with his bones. It was a sound that didn't belong here, not in this fading light. A low, angry growl, like a beast waking up. It came from the north, a rising snarl that cut through the sound of the waves. He looked in his rearview mirror and saw nothing. But the sound got louder, closer, a deep, vibrating promise of insane speed. He reached over and flicked the radar gun on, the digital screen blinking to life. He was still looking in the mirror when it happened. A blur, a flash of color the same shade as the fiery sky. It wasn't just fast. It was a violent eruption of speed, a streak of molten orange. His head snapped around as it shot past his hiding spot. The radar gun beeped, a sharp, offended sound. He glanced down at the number. His mouth went dry. It wasn't 20 over. It wasn't even 30. It was a number that felt reckless, a number that turned a car into a missile. Adrenaline, cold and sharp, flushed the tiredness from his system. This wasn't a kid in a Honda. This was something else. He dropped the coffee cup into the holder, the brown liquid sloshing over the sides. He keyed his mic, his voice suddenly gravelly. 720, I'm in pursuit of a high-speed vehicle, northbound on the coastal route. An orange Lamborghini. Speed is extreme. The word Lamborghini hung in the air over the radio. In this county, a car like that meant one of 3 things: new money from the city, a rental for a bachelor party, or stolen. Given the speed, his money was on the last one. No one with $250,000 in machinery would risk it like this unless they were running from something. He threw the cruiser into drive, the tires spitting gravel as he pulled onto the asphalt. He hit the lights, a blinding strobing of red and blue that shattered the twilight, and the siren, a wail that seemed pathetic against the Lamborghini's fading roar. The car was already a distant speck, but it was a long, straight road with few turn-offs. The cruiser's engine screamed, pushed to its limit, but he knew, with a sinking certainty, that he was driving a bulldog chasing a greyhound. The distance between them wasn't closing. It was just holding, a cruel reminder of the limits of his authority. He focused on the taillights, 2 pinpricks of red fire in the distance. Don't do it, he muttered to himself, to the driver he couldn't see. Just pull over. Don't make this worse. A chase was the worst-case scenario. It endangered everyone. His knuckles were white on the steering wheel. Then, a minor miracle. The fiery taillights brightened. The speck grew larger. The driver was slowing. Not a crash, not a skid, but a deliberate, smooth reduction in speed. The Lamborghini drifted gracefully toward the wide shoulder, its exotic shape looking utterly alien against the scrub grass and guardrail. Relief washed over him, hot and immediate, but it was followed instantly by a tighter, sharper tension. This was the dangerous part. The stop. The unknown. He pulled the cruiser in at a sharp angle behind the car, the protocol for a felony stop flashing in his mind. High-value vehicle. Extreme speed. Potential stolen. He kept the siren going for a second longer, a final blast of authority before killing it. The sudden silence was heavy, broken only by the ticking of his engine and the distant crash of waves. This was the moment his training took over, a script written in adrenaline and caution. He opened his door, using it as a shield. His right hand went to his hip, unsnapping the leather strap over his service weapon. The cool, textured grip of the pistol was familiar in his palm. He did not draw it. Not yet. But his hand rested on it, his finger indexed along the slide, outside the trigger guard. Every sense was dialed to 11. The smell of hot asphalt and ocean salt. The feel of the breeze on his neck. The sight of the car, low and wide and utterly still. He saw the driver's side window begin to lower. It was silent, electric. His voice, when he used it, was a command, loud and flat, meant to carry and to control. Driver, keep your hands where I can see them. Let me see both hands on the steering wheel. His eyes were locked on the window as it descended. What would he see? A smug rich kid? A panicked thief? A gangster? His mind raced through possibilities. The window went down halfway and stopped inside. All he could see was a shape. The interior was shadowed. Then, as his eyes adjusted, he saw the driver. It was a girl. She was young. Not just young, but young. Her face was pale, her eyes wide and dark, with a fear so raw it was almost tangible. She looked like she should be in a school parking lot, not in the cockpit of a spaceship on the side of a highway. Her hands, small and with nails, painted a simple pale color, were gripping the top of the steering wheel so hard. Her knuckles were white bones. The disconnect was so total, it short-circuited his thoughts for a second. The brutal machine. The insane speed. This terrified child. The pieces did not fit, and in that moment of shock, he saw her move. Her right hand twitched, leaving the wheel, darting toward the center console, toward the glove box. Hand! He barked, the sound cracking like a gunshot in the quiet. Let me see that hand, now. But she was panicking. She was in a terror he couldn't fully understand. She was just trying to comply, to get the registration she knew she was supposed to have. My paperwork. She stammered, her voice high and thin, lost in the space between them. To her, it was the logical move. To him, in the hypervigilant theater of a high-risk stop, it was a threatening movement. A hand moving out of sight, toward an area where a weapon could be hidden. His training screamed a single word: threat. In one fluid motion born of countless hours on the range, he drew his pistol. He didn't point it at her, not directly. He brought it to a low, ready position, angled down but forward, his body bladed behind the car door. The message was unmistakable, a language of metal and tension. Do not move your hands. He commanded, his voice harder now, edged with the stress of the moment. Put both hands back on the wheel. Right now, do it. The girl froze. A small, choked sound escaped her. She slowly, tremblingly, put both hands back on the top of the wheel, staring straight ahead, tears now cutting shiny paths through the dust on her cheeks. The officer's heart hammered against his ribs. He had a gun in his hand. A young girl was crying in a car worth more than his house, and he had absolutely no idea what was really going on. The beautiful evening was gone, replaced by a terrible, fragile standoff on the lonely shoulder of the road, with the ocean as the only witness. The world had shrunk to the space between the car door and the Lamborghini's window. The officer's entire being was focused on the girl's hands, still pressed against the steering wheel, like they were glued there. He could see her shoulders shaking with quiet, suppressed sobs. The sight sent a hard, uncomfortable twist through his gut, but he pushed it down. The gun was still a heavy, present weight in his own hand, held low but ready. Emotion was a luxury he couldn't afford right now. Procedure was the only thing keeping this from spiraling. "Listen to me," he said, forcing his voice to be steady, to cut through her panic. It came out flatter than he wanted. "You need to do exactly what I say. Do you understand?" She gave a tiny, jerky nod, still staring straight ahead through the windshield, as if looking at him might make the situation more real. "Good. With your left hand only," he instructed. Each word slow and clear. Very slowly, reach down and turn off the engine. Pull the key out. Then put your hand back on the wheel. He watched, every muscle tight, as her left hand crept down. It fumbled, slick with sweat, near the ignition. The low, idling growl of the engine died abruptly, leaving a ringing silence filled with the whisper of the wind and the distant ocean. The sound of the key being removed was a tiny metallic scrape. She placed it on the dashboard and slowly returned her hand to its place. The car was now just a very expensive, very silent piece of sculpture. "All right," he said. "Now, with that same hand, I need you to slowly roll down your window all the way. All the way down." The electric whir of the window sounded unnaturally loud. As it fully descended, the barrier between them dissolved. He could hear her breathing now, quick and shallow, like a small bird caught in a trap. He could see the details, the simple silver chain around her neck, the freckles across her nose that makeup didn't quite cover, the genuine watery terror in her eyes. She looked like someone's kid sister. The disconnect was staggering, a puzzle that made his head hurt. "My license and registration are in the glove box," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Please, can I get them?" "The car isn't stolen." "It's my car." "We'll get to that," he said, not moving. "First, I need you to tell me your name." It's on the license." "Tell me your name," he repeated, his tone leaving no room for argument. He needed to hear her say it, to start building some fragment of a story. She told him. It was a simple, unremarkable name. Nothing that rang any bells from any bulletin or wanted list. "How old are you?" 19, she said, and a fresh tear rolled down her cheek. "I just turned 19 last week." 19. A kid in a $250,000 weapon. The math in his head got worse. Drug runner? Maybe. Spoiled rich brat? Possibly. But her fear didn't look like the fear of someone guilty of something big. It looked pure, like the fear of a rabbit in headlights. It was the fear of the gun, of him, of the colossal mistake this whole thing had become. He made a decision. He couldn't holster his weapon yet, not until he had more. But he could try to de-escalate, just a notch. "Okay," he said, his voice losing a tiny edge of its hardness. "I need you to listen carefully. I am going to have you step out of the car. We are going to do it one step at a time. You will do nothing unless I tell you to. Do you understand?" She nodded again, a desperate eagerness to comply in the movement. "First, with your left hand, undo your seatbelt. Slow. Click. The belt slithered back into its reel. Now, I want you to open the door from the outside. Use your left hand. Push it open and step out. Keep your hands where I can see them. Then turn around and face away from me. Place your hands on the roof of the car and spread your feet." It was a standard command, but saying it to this crying girl felt absurd, like using a fire hose to water a flower. He watched as she followed the instructions, her movements clumsy with terror. She stepped out, a slight figure in jeans and a simple T-shirt, dwarfed by the low, wide car. She placed her small hands on the hot carbon fiber roof, spreading her feet. She was trembling visibly. He moved then, coming out from behind his door, his gun now pointed at the ground beside him. He approached cautiously, his eyes scanning the car's interior for any quick movement, any other person, any visible weapon. He saw nothing but a designer handbag on the passenger seat and a phone in a cup holder. "Stay right there," he said, coming up beside her. He could smell a faint scent of her perfume, something sweet and light, mixed with the smell of hot engine oil and her sweat. With his free hand, he quickly and professionally patted her down for weapons. It was over in seconds. She was clean. "All right," he said, stepping back. "You can turn around and face me. Keep your hands at your sides." She turned, her face blotchy and streaked. She looked utterly defeated. "Now," he said, finally holstering his weapon. The click of it settling into the leather was a significant sound, a release of the most immediate tension. He saw her whole body sag a little, as if a physical weight had been lifted. The registration. "You can get it now," slowly. She moved back to the open door, leaned in slowly, and opened the glove box. She pulled out a small leather folder and handed it to him. Her fingers were ice cold when they brushed his. He took it, stepping back to give himself space. He opened it. The registration was clear, in her name. The address was local, but in the hills, the kind of place with long driveways and gates. The veng on the paper matched the one on the dash plaque he could see through the windshield. The car was legally, indisputably hers. The speeding ticket he was going to write now felt like the smallest part of this. He handed the folder back. "It's my birthday present," she said softly, almost apologetically, as if reading his thoughts. "From my dad. I know. I know I was going too fast. The road was just so empty, and the car, it just wants to go. I'm so sorry. I got scared when I saw you, and then I didn't know what to do." Her apology sounded real. The story was plausible. A dad with more money than sense gives his teenage daughter a supercar. A moment of stupid, reckless temptation on an open road. It happened, but the gun. He had drawn his gun on a teenager for speeding. The reality of that action, now that the immediate threat was gone, began to crash down on him. His mouth felt dry. He had followed protocol for a high-risk stop, but had this been high risk? Really? Or had he let the price tag of the car and the shocking speed blind him to the actual human driver? He was about to speak. To say something what? He wasn't sure when his patrol car radio, still crackling softly from his open door, broke the moment. "Unit 720, status?" The dispatcher's voice asked. He walked back to his cruiser, leaned in, and picked up the mic. His eyes never left the girl, who was now just standing by her car, looking lost and small. 720, he said into the mic, his voice tired. "Stop is secure. One female driver, 19. Registration is valid to her. No wants or warrants. I'll be out with her for a few more minutes." "Copy, 720. He put the mic back. He needed to write the citation, get her on her way, and try to forget the image of her face when his gun was out. He pulled his ticket book from the passenger seat, but as he turned back, ticket in hand, he saw a new set of headlights slowing on the highway. A dark, unremarkable sedan, not another patrol car. It signaled and pulled over smoothly, parking a careful distance behind his own cruiser. The officer straightened up, his hand instinctively drifting back toward his hip. The stop was supposed to be over. Now what? The driver's door of the sedan opened, and a man in a dark suit stepped out. He didn't look like a concerned citizen. He looked calm, authoritative, and he was walking straight toward them with a purpose that stopped the officer cold. The girl turned too, confusion replacing some of the fear on her face. The evening, it seemed, was far from over. The man in the suit closed his car door with a solid, quiet thump. He didn't rush. His walk was measured, confident, the kind of walk that said he was used to entering rooms or situations and owning them. The fading twilight caught the sharp cut of his jacket and the glint of a simple, expensive watch on his wrist. He wasn't a big man, but he carried himself in a way that made him seem to fill the space between the police cruiser and the Lamborghini. The officer felt his body go taut again. The brief moment of relief from a moment ago completely gone. His hand, which had been reaching for the ticket book, now rested on the butt of his holstered pistol, not drawing it, but ready. This was an unknown. A civilian approaching an active traffic stop was never good. This one didn't look like he was coming to complain or gawk. He looked like he was coming to take charge. "Sir, you need to stay back, please," the officer called out, his voice projecting the command he no longer entirely felt. "Return to your vehicle." The man didn't stop. He held up a single hand, palm out, a gesture that was both an acknowledgement and a dismissal. He kept walking until he was about 10 feet away, a polite but firm distance. His eyes, sharp and assessing, flicked from the officer's tense posture to the girl by the Lamborghini. Her face was a mask of stunned recognition, followed by a flood of pure, desperate relief so strong it looked like she might collapse. "It's all right, officer," the man said. His voice was calm, mid-range, the kind of voice used in boardrooms and courtrooms. It carried without needing to be loud. "My name is David Chase. I'm the state attorney general." The words didn't quite land at first. They floated in the salty air. Attorney General, the state's top lawyer, the head of the Department of Law, a man who oversaw every district attorney, who argued the biggest cases, who was, technically, this patrolman's ultimate boss in the long, bureaucratic chain of the law. The officer's mind went blank for a second, then scrambled. This had to be a trick, a lie. The Attorney General didn't just materialize on the shoulder of a coastal highway. But the man's calm certainty, the quality of the suit, the girl's reaction, it all rang terrifyingly true. The officer's mouth was dry as sand. I'm going to need to see some identification, sir," the officer managed to say, the protocol for verifying anyone's claim kicking in automatically. "Of course," the man said smoothly. He moved slowly, telegraphing his actions. He reached into his inside jacket pocket and produced a slim leather wallet. He flipped it open, holding it out. The officer took a careful step forward, never fully turning his back on the girl or the surroundings, and took it. The badge was gold, distinct from a police shield. The identification card was clear, with the official seal of the state. The name and title were printed in bold letters. The photograph was undoubtedly the man standing before him, though in the picture he looked less weary, more like someone giving a press conference. A cold wave washed through the officer. It was real. He handed the wallet back, his movements stiff. "Attorney General," he said, the title feeling foreign in his mouth. What brings you here, sir?" David Chase accepted the wallet, slipped it back into his pocket, and then his gaze settled fully on the girl. His expression softened, just a fraction, into something resembling paternal concern. "That's my question for you, officer. I was driving behind you. I saw the stop. I saw you draw your weapon on this young woman." He said it plainly, without obvious accusation, but the words were like stones dropped into a still pond. The officer felt a hot flush creep up his neck. "Sir, it was a high-risk stop protocol. The vehicle was exceeding the speed limit by a significant margin. A vehicle of this profile and value is often associated with—" "I understand protocol," Chase interrupted, not harshly, but with a finality that closed down the explanation. "I also understand what I saw. A traffic violation. A very expensive one, certainly, but a traffic violation nonetheless." He looked at the girl again. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, a quick, jerky movement. "No, sir. I'm okay. Her voice was tiny. Has the officer explained why he pointed a gun at you? Chase asked her, his tone gentle but direct. Chase, please, the girl said, the use of his last name sounding strangely formal and intimate at the same time. It was my fault. I was speeding. Really fast. He was doing his job. She was defending him. The officer felt another twist of that complicated, sick feeling in his gut. The Attorney General gave a slow, thoughtful nod, as if filing her statement away. He turned his attention back to the officer. The softness was gone, replaced by a quiet, penetrating intensity. Officer, what is your name? Riggins, sir. He gave his last name and his badge number automatically. Officer Riggins, Chase repeated. You verified her registration? Yes, sir. It's valid. To her. And she has no warrants? No outstanding reasons for such an escalated response beyond the speed? No, sir. Not that I've found yet. So, at this moment, we have a licensed driver in her legally registered vehicle who committed a speeding infraction. Chase stated it as a simple fact, a closing argument. I am not here to interfere with your duty to issue a citation. That is between you and the driver. But I am here as a witness to the use of force. Drawing a firearm is a serious action. It changes the encounter fundamentally. For the citizen, it is a terrifying, potentially traumatic event. It elevates the risk to everyone involved exponentially. He paused, letting the weight of his position and his words sink in. The sound of the waves seemed to grow louder in the silence. I watched you. After the initial shock, you conducted yourself professionally. You holstered your weapon when you ascertained there was no immediate threat. I credit you for that. But the initial decision, that is what concerns me. Did the car's value, its appearance, dictate the level of your response more than the driver's actions? Officer Riggins had no good answer. The question was the very doubt that had been gnawing at him since he saw her face. Had he seen a Lamborghini first and a person second? I followed my training, sir, he said, but it sounded weak, even to him. I don't doubt your training, Chase replied. But sometimes training needs to be examined. Sometimes we need to ask if our procedures allow a bias toward a certain type of car, a certain profile, to override basic human assessment. He glanced at the girl, who was watching this exchange like a tennis match, her eyes wide. This young woman's father is a friend of mine, a good man. He gave her this car because he trusts her. She made a mistake today, a big one, and she will be held accountable for that mistake with a ticket, and I assure you, a very long conversation at home. But was the mistake so grave it required the introduction of a lethal weapon into the equation before a single word was spoken? He wasn't yelling. He wasn't even raising his voice. That was the most powerful part. He was just reasoning, calmly and devastatingly, from a position of immense authority. Officer Riggins felt utterly exposed, judged not just by his superior, but by the silent, crying witness beside her car. Chase sighed, a long, weary sound that seemed to carry the weight of 1,000 similar conversations. Issue your citation, Officer Riggins. Do your job. But when you're done here, I want you to go back to your station, and I want you to think very carefully about this stop. Write it up in your report with absolute honesty. Describe her face when you drew your weapon. Describe your own thought process. Then tomorrow, I want you to have a conversation with your sergeant about this. Tell him I witnessed it and that I expect a review. It wasn't a threat of termination. It was something perhaps more profound, an order for introspection with the full weight of the state behind it. He turned to the girl. You will drive home, directly home. You will not speed. You will call your father the moment you get there and tell him exactly what happened. Is that understood?" She nodded, fresh tears of shame and relief in her eyes. "Yes, sir." The Attorney General gave Officer Riggins one last, long look, a look that was neither friendly nor hostile, but deeply, gravely evaluative. Then, without another word, he turned and walked back to his sedan. Officer Riggins was left standing there, the untouched ticket book in his hand, the ocean wind chilling the sweat on his back. The stop was no longer about a speeding sports car. It had just become about everything he thought he knew about his job. The girl stood by her door, waiting for him to move, to say something, to give her the expensive piece of paper that now felt like the least important thing in the world. The real judgment had already been delivered, not from the bench of a court, but from the asphalt of a lonely highway. The dark sedan pulled away, its taillights disappearing into the flow of evening traffic as if it had never been there. But the space it left behind felt charged, hollowed out. The officer and the girl stood frozen in the aftermath, like two actors after the main play has ended, unsure what to do with the empty stage. He looked at her. She looked at the ground, her arms wrapped tightly around herself, even though the evening wasn't cold. The wind just made it feel that way. The Officer Riggins realized he was still clutching the ticket book. His knuckles ached. He forced his fingers to relax, the stiff leather of the cover creaking. "All right," he said, and his voice sounded strange to him, rough and tired. "Let's get this done." He walked back to the open door of his cruiser, his steps feeling heavy. He leaned against the frame, the metal warm from the engine. He flipped the book open to a fresh page. The routine of it was a lifeline: name, date, time, location, vehicle make, model, color, plate number. He filled each blank with mechanical precision, his handwriting a tight, controlled script. The speed. He wrote down the number from the radar gun. Seeing it on paper, in his own hand, made his stomach clench. It was reckless. It was stupid. She could have died or killed someone else. That fact was the bedrock under all this, the one solid thing he could hold on to. She had been wrong. He finished writing, tore the pale yellow copy from the book, and walked back over to her. She hadn't moved. He held it out. "You have 30 days to respond to this. You can pay the fine, or you can contest it in court." He recited the standard lines, but they felt meaningless. Contest it? With the Attorney General as a witness? The idea was almost laughable. She took the ticket, her fingers barely touching his. She didn't look at it. She just folded it once, then again, and shoved it into the back pocket of her jeans. "I'm really sorry," she whispered again, not looking at him. "For all of it." He nodded, not knowing what to say. Sorry for the speed? Sorry for the gun? Sorry for the boss of the entire state's legal system showing up? It was a tangled mess of sorries. "Just drive safe," he finally said. It was all he had left. "Go straight home." She gave a quick, small nod and slipped back into the driver's seat of the Lamborghini. The door closed with a soft, expensive thud. The engine started, not with a roar this time, but with a subdued purr. She signaled, checked her mirror with exaggerated care, and pulled slowly onto the highway. She kept it at a crawl, the car looking almost embarrassed as it disappeared into the dusk. Officer Riggins stood and watched until the orange speck was completely gone. Then the silence rushed in, absolute and heavy. He got into his cruiser, closed the door, and just sat there for a long minute. The weight of what had just happened settled onto his shoulders, a physical pressure. He had done 100 high-risk stops. He'd drawn his weapon before. But this one was different. It was the girl's face. It was the calm, devastating voice of the Attorney General questioning the very core of his judgment. It was the sickening feeling that maybe, just maybe, the man was right. He keyed his mic. "Dispatch 720. The stop is concluded. Citation issued. I'm clear. Copy, 720. Anything further? Negative. 720 out. He released the button. The rest of his shift passed in a blur. He drove. He answered a call about a noise complaint that turned out to be a loud television. He helped an old man change a flat tire. But his mind was back on that shoulder, replaying every second, examining every choice. Asterisk, did the car's value dictate the level of your response? The question echoed in his head, relentless. When his shift ended, he drove back to the station. The usual evening chatter in the locker room felt distant, like he was hearing it from underwater. He changed out of his uniform in silence, hanging it up with more care than usual. He caught his own eyes in the small mirror on his locker door. He looked older. He sat down at the battered computer at his assigned desk. He needed to write the report. The Attorney General had told him to write it with honesty. He opened a new incident form. His fingers hovered over the keyboard dot. He started with the facts. The radar reading. The pursuit. The make and model of the vehicle. Then he got to the stop. He wrote, Asterisk, I initiated a high-risk felony. Stop procedure due to the excessive speed and the high-profile nature of the vehicle, which is consistent with department policy for potential stolen property or elevated threat. Asterisk, he stopped. He read the sentence back. It was textbook. It was what he was supposed to write. It was also a shield. He deleted the line. He started again. Asterisk, I observed the driver to be a young female, appearing to be in her late teens. She was visibly frightened. Upon my command, she lowered her window. When she moved her hand toward the glove compartment, I perceived a potential threat and drew my service weapon, holding it in a low-ready position. Asterisk, it was drier, less defensive, closer to the truth. He kept typing, describing her compliance, the registration check, the pat-down. Then he wrote the part that made his skin prickle. Asterisk, during the stop, State Attorney General David Chase arrived on the scene as an independent witness. He identified himself and observed the remainder of the encounter. Asterisk, he finished the report, detailing the issuance of the citation. He saved it and sent it to his sergeant's queue. There was no hiding from it now. It was in the system. He drove home. His house was dark and quiet. His wife was already asleep. He stood in the kitchen, drinking a glass of water, staring out the black window at his own reflection. He thought about the girl driving home to her big house in the hills, to a father who was friends with the Attorney General. He wondered if she was sleeping, or if she was lying awake too, staring at the ceiling, seeing the barrel of his gun every time she closed her eyes. Asterisk, 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 across town. In a living room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city lights, the girl was doing exactly that. She was sitting on a huge soft sofa, still in the same jeans and t-shirt. The folded ticket lay on the glass coffee table like an accusation. Her father sat in a chair opposite her. He wasn't yelling. He was quiet, which was worse. He had listened to her tearful, rambling story, the thrill of the empty road, the sudden lights, the terror of the gun, the shocking appearance of his friend. When she finished, he was silent for a long time. He pointed a gun at you, he said finally, his voice tight. For a second, Dad, he was scared too. I moved when I shouldn't have. That doesn't matter. The words burst out of him, sharp with the fear he'd been holding in. You were speeding. You get a ticket. You maybe even get your license suspended. You do not get a gun pointed at you. That is not the exchange. That is never the exchange. He stood up and paced to the window, his back to her. David was right to say what he said. That officer saw the car, not my daughter. He turned back, his face pained. And you? What were you thinking? That car is not a toy. It's a responsibility. You could have been killed. You could have killed someone else. She started crying again, silent tears of shame. I know all of that now. I didn't think. That's the problem, he said, his anger deflating into a deep, weary sadness. You didn't think. And that officer, in that moment, maybe he didn't either. He walked over, sat next to her, and put an arm around her shoulders. She leaned into him, finally feeling the full weight of the shock. We're going to deal with the ticket, he said quietly. You'll pay it, and you won't drive the Lamborghini for a long time. But that's not all. He took a deep breath. What happened to you was wrong. It was a failure in the system. If David hadn't been there, I don't even want to think about it. We need to make sure it doesn't happen to someone else, someone who doesn't have an attorney general in their back pocket. She looked up at him, confused. What do you mean? I mean, we're going to file a formal complaint. Not to get that officer fired, but to make the department look at what happened. To make them ask the same questions David asked. Down at the quiet police station, in a back office, the sergeant was reading the report on his computer screen. He let out a long, low whistle. He read it again, his eyes lingering on two names, the exotic car model and David Chase, State Attorney General. He picked up his phone. This wasn't a report for tomorrow. This was a call for the watch commander, right now. The quiet of the night shift was about to be shattered. The incident on the highway was no longer just an incident. It was a problem, and it was officially theirs to solve. The storm, it seemed, was only beginning to gather. The next morning, the station felt different. It wasn't anything you could see, just a feeling in the air, a low hum of tension. Officers moved a little quicker. Conversations in the hallways were quieter. The story had spread, of course. Not through official channels first, but in hushed tones over coffee and in text messages. Asterisk Riggins pulled over a Lamborghini. Kid inside. The Attorney General showed up. Drew his gun. Asterisk, it was the kind of story that grew spines as it was passed along. Officer Riggins walked in just before his shift, his uniform crisp, his face a careful mask of neutrality. He could feel the eyes on him. Some were curious, some were wary. A few held a flicker of sympathy. He went straight to the watch commander's office and knocked. The commander was a tired-looking man with close-cropped gray hair. He pointed to a chair. Close the door, Riggins. The meeting was blunt. The formal complaint from the girl's father had already been filed electronically. A detailed, lawyerly document that focused not on the speed, but on the disproportionate and traumatic escalation of force. It mentioned the Attorney General by name as a witness. The commander had Riggins's report up on his screen. You stuck to the facts in your report, the commander said, rubbing his temples. That's good. But this isn't about facts anymore. It's about optics. It's about the AG asking why we point guns at teenagers for speeding. The chief has already been on the phone with the mayor. Internal Affairs is opening a review. Riggins felt a cold knot in his stomach. meant interviews, scrutiny, his every decision picked apart under a microscope. Sir, I followed the high-risk vehicle protocol. The speed, the car's profile. I know the protocol, the commander interrupted, not unkindly. And IA will decide if you followed it correctly. But between you and me, that protocol was written for drug runners in stolen Ferraris, not scared kids in birthday presents. The world has changed, Riggins. People have cameras. They have lawyers who play golf with the Attorney General. Our old playbook, it needs some new pages. He was placed on administrative duties, effective immediately. No cruiser, no patrol. He was given a desk in a back room to review old case files, a kind of professional purgatory. The punishment wasn't in the work. It was in the silence, the absence of the radio, the view of 4 blank walls instead of the open road. He spent his days pushing paper. The image of the girl's frightened face burned into his mind. A constant, accusing companion. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk across the state. In the polished marble halls of the Capitol, the Attorney General was preparing for a press conference. His staff had urged him not to mention this specific incident. "It's a local police matter," they said. "You could be accused of interfering." David Chase listened, then shook his head. "I wasn't interfering as the ag that night. I was a witness. And as the ag today, I have a responsibility to what I witnessed." He saw the bigger picture, not a single cop, not a single girl, but a pattern. A pattern where the thing a person drove, or wore, or looked like could trigger a lethal response before a single word was spoken. At the press conference, he stood at a podium bristling with microphones. He did not name the officer. He did not name the girl or her father. He spoke in broad, principled terms. "Recently," he said, his calm voice carrying through the room, "I observed a traffic stop. A young person had committed a serious traffic violation. But the initial response from law enforcement was calibrated not to the driver's actions, but to the value and make of the vehicle they were driving. A firearm was introduced into the encounter almost immediately. Thankfully, the situation de-escalated without injury. But it forced me, and should force all of us, to ask a critical question. Are our policies and our training ensuring public safety? Or are they sometimes allowing, bias conscious or not, to dictate a level of force that erodes public trust?" He announced a statewide initiative. Not an investigation, but a collaborative review. He was forming a working group with police chiefs, union representatives, community advocates, and use-of-force experts to re-examine high-risk stop protocols. "The goal," he said, "is not to handcuff the police, but to ensure that our first response in a tense situation is tempered with discernment. To ensure we see the person before we see the stereotype." The story exploded. It was on the local news, then picked up by national outlets. The narrative was irresistible. Attorney General cites personal experience to push police reform. For the girl and her family, it was a relief. Their complaint had sparked something bigger than themselves. For the police department, it was a storm of unwanted attention. Asterisk, 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 weeks passed. The Internal Affairs investigation concluded that Officer Riggins had acted within the technical bounds of existing policy, but noted a failure in tactical patience and situational assessment. He was not fired. He was given a formal letter of reprimand that would sit in his file. The real sentence was the mandatory retraining. It wasn't the punitive, shame-based class he'd feared. It was different. He sat in a room with other officers, some from his department, some from others. They watched videos, real footage, shaky and chaotic. They role-played. The trainers pushed them relentlessly. Asterisk, what do you see? Describe the person. What are their hands doing? What is their face telling you? Is the car a weapon, or is it just a car? Slow down. Breathe. Communicate. Asterisk, one afternoon, the scenario was a traffic stop for a broken taillight. The driver was nervous, fumbling. Riggins, playing the officer, felt the old urge to command, to control the uncertainty. The trainer stopped him. "Why is your hand on your gun?" "He's looking for his registration." "Tell him where it is. Guide him. Your voice is a tool. Use it." It was grating, and it felt soft. But a part of him, the part that kept seeing that girl's tears, listened. He began to understand what the commander had meant. The old playbook was about dominating the situation to survive it. The new one was about managing the situation so everyone survived it. It was harder. It required more thought, more risk. It felt, in a way, more human. The department, under pressure from the city council, and the glare of the AG's initiative formally changed its policy. The term high-risk vehicle was more narrowly defined. The default for a traffic violation, no matter the car, was no longer a felony stop approach. De-escalation and verbal communication were to be the first, second, and third steps whenever possible. Asterisk, 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 on a Saturday morning months later, Officer Riggins was back on patrol, on modified duty. He was driving a marked cruiser, handling low-priority calls. He was cautious, his every move now shadowed by the memory of what had happened. He was parked near a city park when he saw a familiar flash of orange. His breath hitched. It was the Lamborghini. It was driving slowly, obeying the speed limit. It signaled and turned into the park's lot, parking in a far corner. He watched, his heart pounding for reasons he couldn't explain. The driver's door opened, and the girl got out. She was alone. She walked over to a picnic table, sat down, and just looked out at the grass, pulling her knees up to her chest. She looked older. Not in years, but in experience. Riggins sat in his cruiser for a long time. He thought about driving away. He thought about protocol, about complaints, about keeping his distance. Then he turned off his engine, got out, and walked across the lot. He didn't approach her directly. He stopped a polite distance from the picnic table, his hands clearly at his sides. She looked up, and her eyes widened. For a second, the fear flickered back, raw and immediate. Then it faded, replaced by a weary recognition. "I'm not here on official business," he said quietly. "I just saw your car." She nodded slowly, watching him. He took a breath. The words were hard, like pushing stones out of his throat. "I wanted to say, I am sorry. For that night. The gun. It shouldn't have happened. You didn't deserve that." She was silent for a moment, studying him. "I was going way too fast," she said finally. "I was being an idiot." "That's true," he said, and the honesty seemed to matter. "But one mistake shouldn't lead to another bigger one." "Mine was bigger." She looked down at her hands, then back at him. "My dad says you guys changed the rules because of what happened." "We're trying to," he said. "It's a work in progress." A faint, sad smile touched her lips. "Me too." She paused. "I don't drive it much anymore. It doesn't feel the same." He nodded, understanding completely. Some vehicles, like some days, are forever marked by what happened in them. There was nothing more to say. He gave her a small, awkward nod. "You take care. You too, officer." He turned and walked back to his cruiser. He didn't feel absolved. That wasn't the point. The point was the apology had been spoken and received. It was a small human stitch in a tear that had felt much larger. He drove away, the park growing smaller in his mirror. The girl remained at the picnic table, a solitary figure in the morning sun. Both were permanently altered by 60 seconds on a roadside. But the changes didn't end with them. New officers would now be trained differently. Policies on paper had shifted. A conversation had started in the highest offices of the state. The story had been about a gun and a car, but it became about seeing the person inside. And that, they both understood in their own ways, was a lesson that needed learning again and again by everyone.